Most people in South Africa know me as South Africa's youngest millionaire. I normally introduce myself as a young visionary, pioneer, game changer. The biggest challenge is, especially when my story broke out, in South Africa and internationally, a lot of people did not understand what I do, and obviously that was one of the reasons why there were so many question marks around my name. As I'm traveling across Africa right now, apart from teaching what I do, I'm also just teaching people key principles that you need to not just make money, but to also grow as an individual and succeed in whatever it is that you're doing.
Hello, Africa. You're listening to 1000 African Voices. I'm your host, Aburengwi C, coming to you from our Johannesburg studios. 1000 African Voices is a program that profiles Africans of diverse cultures who have traveled and lived across the African continent and the world. In this series, we will collect and share stories from all parts of Africa. Welcome.
1000 African Voices.
Hello, Africa, and welcome to another episode of 1000 African Voices. Today, we're joined by the founder and chairman of the Rivoltare company, Sandile, who shall introduce himself to the listeners of 1000 African Voices. Hello, Sandile.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you so much for having me on the show. It's truly an honor.
No, thank you for joining us. So your full name is Sandile Shezi. Most South Africans are familiar with the name, but I do know that there will be people across Africa and the world at large who are not familiar with Sandile Shezi. So can you maybe just introduce yourself to those listeners in particular? How do you normally introduce yourself?
It's quite a bit of a tricky one because most people in South Africa know me as South Africa's youngest millionaire, which that was quite a number of years ago. At the age of 23, I'm almost 28 now. But I normally introduce myself as a young visionary, pioneer, game changer, young entrepreneur from South Africa and who's just been fortunate to be able to really channel his energy in pursuing a far bigger dream than South Africa, and hence one has managed to build businesses across the African continent. So really, if someone is listening out there and they just want to know who is Sandile Shezi, I would say I am the Aliko Dangote, the Mansa Musa of my generation.
I really like that. So maybe let's talk about how you became the Sandile Shezi that we know today. So how did you make your way to becoming, at the time, South Africa's youngest millionaire?
Look, I think it's growing up in a typical South African township. I was born and raised in Umlazi. Those of us who might not know Umlazi, it's one of the biggest townships in KZN, which is a province in South Africa. Raised by my parents and my grandmother. I was fortunate to be in an environment where entrepreneurship was the order of the day. My grandmother used to sell anything and everything from home, be it bread, be it milk. So that is generally where the entrepreneurship spirit basically comes from. I got exposed to that life of trying to make ends meet from a very young age. And eventually when one got into high school, coming from a township, things like pocket money, it's not something you get. I mean, kids these days have got a monthly allowance. We are not fortunate to have such. And obviously one had to start from a young age to think of how can I possibly start making money, and so that I can be able to take care of myself and be able to, do certain things on my own without having to bother my parents. And that is when I started off selling muffins from school, which was the only thing that really made sense at the time and what I could afford. And obviously from there, one went on to selling clothes and a number of other smaller businesses. And eventually I landed myself in the financial markets, which basically got me to where I am today.
What was it about? I don't know, maybe something happened in the past that made you decide that you were going to be a millionaire. And I don't know if it was a conscious decision you made or if it's something that you just accidentally stumbled upon.
For me, it was never really about being a millionaire or making millions. I think at that young age, the most important thing for me was trying to sort of create a comfortable life, and be in a comfortable position where I can do certain things without necessarily having to depend on either my parents or depend on the government, whatever the case may be. So really it was an inspiration of, let me just find ways of being comfortable. And obviously when you get into business and you start making a bit of money, you start realizing that the potential is huge and there's really no limit to it. And obviously one moved from doing one thing to the next.
And what are some of the challenges that you've had? And I know from time to time you'll appear in the news for one thing or the other, but what have you found to be some of the challenges that you've had to deal with as, suppose, once again, at the time as South Africa's youngest millionaire, which then earned you this name or reputation of someone who has the ability to amass a fortune?
I think for me, the biggest challenge is, especially when my story broke out, in South Africa and internationally, a lot of people did not understand what I do, and obviously that was one of the reasons why there were so many question marks around my name, that how credible is this individual, and what he does, is it legal? There were so many question marks based on obviously the lack of information that was around. Whereas if you fast forward where we are now, 4 or 5 years later, everybody's now trading. Everybody's talking about the financial markets, not just in South Africa, across the African continent. I've been traveling all over Africa, and I'm starting to realize that if you look at where we were when my story broke out and where we are now, only now are people starting to catch on and realize that actually this is a valid opportunity, and a lot of people are taking advantage of it. So I think I was one of those people who really, really got crucified to some extent. And obviously, knowing myself and my journey and what I'm doing, I wasn't easily discouraged. Instead, for me, it gave me even more reason to push harder, because I knew that eventually one day people will then start realizing that actually Sandile was at the forefront of change.
Well, I'm as I'm listening, I'm thinking to myself of the kind of a typical question that a listener would have for you. And one that comes to mind now is, so we've spoken about some of the challenges that you have faced. What would you say are the positives of being in a financially better state compared to the average South African or the average African? What are some of the things that having money affords you that then makes your life easier or better?
I was actually listening to our finance minister in South Africa, Mr. Tito Mboweni, in one of his interviews when he was in New York for a conference. One thing that he said jokingly, and to me, it really hit home. I could relate. He spoke about recession. When you look at things like recession, we just came out of a technical recession in South Africa. Those things really do not affect the rich people in the country and the wealthy people in the country. It affects the typical average working middle class and obviously the poor people to some degree. And hence for me, that was always one of the things that I wanted to ensure that I'm able to be comfortable no matter what happens in the country, economy-wise, politically. And that is why you find that where we are right now, whatever happens in the country, it's easy for people that are financially stable to pack their bags and leave. That is why even government constantly speaks about investors, ensuring that investors are comfortable. They have confidence in leadership, because when you reach a certain level in life, you basically end up having so many options. You have a life in South Africa, you have a life in Dubai, you have a life in New York. So it's a matter of, it gives you so many options, and hence you're able to create a comfortable environment around you for yourself as well as for your family.
All right. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I mean, earlier when you were talking about your background, the fact that you were born and raised, I think you said in Umlazi in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, it sounded to me like you really built from the ground up, as opposed to people who maybe come from rich families, so they have this lump sum and they sort of start their life in a very comfortable position. Sort of when I read your story, it sounds to me like you started from zero, and I'm wondering how that journey was, as you kind of watched your wealth grow from zero until you hit that 1 million rand mark. How was that for you? Maybe just to take us through what it took for you to move from zero to 1 million rands, just as a starting point.
Look, I think that's probably one of the reasons why my story really touched so many people's lives across the world, even in places like London, New York. A lot of people were moved by my story, not based on how much money I made, but looking at the fact that I literally built from nowhere, from the ground. Whereas it would be different if I came from a rich family. So for me, it was really a very emotional journey, a really, really mentally draining journey, if I can put it that way, because you come across so many challenges, and especially when you don't come from money. What you're building is all you have. You've got nothing else to fall back onto. There's no trust fund waiting for you just in case things go south. But it really built me to be the person that I am mentally. It shaped my character to some extent. And the most important thing that I think I'd love to share with everybody listening is it makes you realize that anybody can become somebody. Number one. Number two, what's important is understanding that in the process of growth, it should never be about the destination, but rather it should be about the journey. And I always say that if you took away everything that I've made up until this moment, there's one thing you can never take away from me. That is the experience of making. And as a result, if I were to redo what I've done, it will now take me a shorter period of time based on the experience and the knowledge and the lessons and the challenges one went through. And hence, I'd love to just use that to encourage anybody pursuing their dreams, that don't run away from the challenges. Don't feel as though those challenges are there to destroy you. Those challenges are there to shape you. And once you've gone through them, it's like going through a test. Tests at school or university, they're quite challenging. They're very stressful. But once you pass that test, you move on to the next level. So for me, the same applies, going from zero to making that first million. There's so many tests and so many challenges one had to go through. But for me to get to that first million, it means I was graduating from one level to the next. And apart from the money, which is just the cherry on top, it is the lessons. It is the experience that I was accumulating over the years, which I'm now utilizing to even build my international, basically, interests across Africa.
I really like that. Even if you were to lose everything you have, what you're saying is the experience that you've gained in building it, it's something that you'll always have. And it reminds me of people who win the lottery from out of the blue or out of nowhere, and a couple of months or years later, they have nothing and they cannot figure out how to get the money back because they won it. They didn't work for it, in a manner of speaking. Whereas someone like you and those that have amassed wealth by building means, yes, they may lose the money, but they know how to make it. So it's not a crisis per se, because you've got all the skills and experience to get back to where you were. So I really like that. At this point, Sandile, some of the listeners will still be wondering what is it or what it is that you do. So between 8 and 5, and I felt silly asking an 8 to 5 question because I would imagine that in your world there is no 8 to 5. But if you can just go with that, can you just take us through your typical day, sort of between the time you wake up and you go to bed? What does Sandile do?
All right. So Sandile is basically a financial markets trader, if I can just simplify it that way. Locally in South Africa, people are not familiar with the term financial markets. They prefer using the term forex trader, which I really hate for many reasons. But basically, I'm in the financial markets. I'm basically a speculator. So what we basically do is trade different financial instruments. As a listener, basically, just to simplify this as much as I possibly can, you get people who trade in the primary market, and then you get people who trade in our market, which is the paper market. So what will happen is that a practical example is you can get a farmer, somebody who farms, and they're producing, for example, sugar. Now, the challenge is if you're a farmer, you've got so much risk at hand, because what if there's no rain? What if something happens to your harvest? So what happens is that a primary trader goes and approaches a farmer and strikes a deal and says, listen, as soon as this harvest of yours is done, I wanna buy this at X amount, and they put together a contract and they lock the price. And what then happens, the person who now carries the risk is not the farmer, but the primary market trader. Now, what then happens is that this primary market trader cannot take that risk to the bank or to somebody and get insured, because what happens if the farmer doesn't produce the goods that they've agreed on? So what they then do is they take that contract, which we classify as a future contract, to the markets where we trade it as financial markets traders, and we trade it amongst ourselves. So that doesn't just, our trading is not just based on just sugar. That is just me making an example of a commodity. Because under commodities, you'll get agriculture, you'll get precious metals, you get so on. So we can trade anything from gold to cotton to sugar to flour to currencies. And obviously, the beauty of it is that unlike the primary market traders that actually have to go to the actual field and sign deals with people or companies, we're able to basically make money on our laptops. We're able to make money on our cell phones. We're able to make money from wherever we are, as long as we're connected to the internet. And that is the beauty, basically, of being able to trade paper assets. So obviously, I'm not just an individual trader. I've also got a company that teaches people how to do what I do. I've got a company that helps people understand what we do. And there's so many other things that we do within the financial markets, apart from just teaching people. So on a daily, you'll find that I will wake up in the morning, first thing, go to gym. Straight after gym, I'll go straight to having breakfast. And from there, I hit the office, attending meetings back to back. And in between that, obviously trading. And what I've done is I've also built a team of traders in South Africa that are basically, even when I'm in my meetings, they trading 24 hours in a day. And my job is just obviously overseeing the transactions that they're working on, approving certain trades, declining certain transactions that we take as a company. And apart from that, I also just travel across Africa. We've got offices in Tanzania and Dar es Salaam. We've got offices in Namibia, Windhoek. I just came back from Botswana this past weekend. I'm going to Zambia, Lusaka. So my thing is now just helping many young people and old people across the African continent and to understand how the financial markets work in depth. In detail, and obviously build my portfolio as well simultaneously at the same time.
When someone comes to you and say, can you teach me the art and I suppose science of what you do, is there something you look out for, or I suppose is the training process or program open to just about anyone who's interested in joining so that they can learn what it is that you do?
So basically, it's pretty much open to anybody and everyone anywhere across the African continent, provided you're looking at making some money. You know, to give an example, some people just do it part time, some people do it full time. It entirely depends on obviously your personal goals, the reason why you're looking at doing it. And for me, I don't believe there's somebody I cannot teach. You know, if you look at our clientele base across the African continent and outside of Africa, we've got young people, we've got old people, we've got professionals, we've got unemployed people, we've got a whole variety of different types of people. So hence, I really don't believe there's somebody who wouldn't qualify. The most important thing is, you know, the will, the hunger. If you have channeled your mind correctly that I'm prepared to do this, anybody can do it.
And maybe that's a good segue in a way that leads me to sort of finding out whether you personally feel that there is a price, if any, that you've had to pay in reaching what sounds like a mastery phase in contracts trading. Would you say that there's a price that you've paid in being the youngest millionaire in SA and now at 28, still having to run companies and travel across Africa? So I understand the benefits, but I also just wanted to unpack the demerits, so to speak. Are the things that you feel you have sacrificed, in a manner of speaking, in building not only the brand of Sandile, but in building your wealth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, as I'm traveling across Africa right now, apart from teaching what I do, I'm also just teaching people key principles that you need to not just make money, but to also grow as an individual and succeed in whatever it is that you're doing. There's 8 key principles that I'm sharing, which is part of my Think Like a Billionaire tour that I'm doing across Africa as well as in the Middle East. One of the principles that I'm sharing there is discipline. You know, and for me, discipline will cost you almost everything. And you'll find that one of the major things that one has to discipline themselves, especially if you're looking at succeeding in whatever it is that you do, is disciplining yourself with time. You know, disciplining yourself with time means every minute counts, you know, and hence ever since I started this journey, I find that it's very rare for me to be able to spend time with friends. You know, it's very rare for me to be able to just sit around and relax with people. And, you know, so that obviously comes with a huge expense. You know, you lose out on so many relationships and so many friendships and so much time that is lost while pursuing your dreams. And unfortunately, that is the price that you have to pay. You know, you have to pay. You just got to choose. Is it friendships that are more important, or is it actually achieving the ultimate goal, you know, which is obviously growing as an individual and apart from accumulating the wealth, but it's also really honestly building a legacy. Because, I mean, for me, beyond the money, I mean, today we speak about guys like your Mansa Musa, you know, we speak about your Aliko Dangotes, you know, I mean, Mansa Musa was probably not even there when I was born, you know, but I know about him. I read about him because of how much of an impact that he had in the world, you know. And for me, that is ultimately what I also want, that one day, even, you know, 50, 100 years from now, you know, you have people still speaking about Sandile Shezi. So when you look at the price that you pay for it and the rewards, I think the rewards are far greater than the price.
I'm really glad you answered that question in the manner that you did. And the reason I wanted to ask that and get your response is that there are people who look at your life from a distance and want all the good that they perceive your life to have, but at the same time, they still want to have everything else. So I like what you're saying, that there are things that you've had to sacrifice and in a way choose what it is that you wanted to pursue. And it sounds like what you've chosen is to build this legacy of Sandile Shezi, whereas the rest of us still want to have the best of both worlds. And I find more and more as I speak to people like yourself that you really do need to choose what it is that you want to pursue and be single-minded about choosing and chasing that. Sandile, as we sort of maybe start wrapping up, are there maybe things that you want to say just to motivate our African listeners, especially the young people out there who may want to follow in your footsteps?
one thing I'd love to share, apart from just motivating, is education. Education, I believe we're really in a crisis, not just in South Africa, but in Africa as a whole. A lot of young people are educated. A lot of young people are qualified for that matter. I engage with young people, extremely highly qualified individuals, but who are really struggling, and I think it's about time as young people we start reviewing our education system, be it in South Africa, be it in Ghana, be it in Nigeria, wherever it is. As a continent, I really think we really need to start reviewing it as a whole and try and play some role in making our leaders realize that the world is changing. We just entered the fourth industrial revolution right now. But if you look at some of the things that are being taught in our schools, it really leaves you with a whole lot of question marks in terms of how relevant is this? I just spoke to one of my mentors, and he said to me, Sandile, I don't have a problem with education, but here's the challenge. You cannot work out. Those of us who go to gym, you cannot work out today and think you'll still be in shape 5 years from now and think you'll still be in shape 10 years from now. You working out today is relevant today. And that is why you find that a lot of billionaires and a lot of multimillionaires, they might not have formal education, but they are constantly learning every single day. And what they are learning is relevant in what they are doing. You look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates might not be the most highly qualified individual in the world, but he learns every day. And what he learns is in line with what he's doing. And whereas on the other hand, we are learning stuff that even our parents were learning. And the question then is, how relevant is that today?
I really like that. I mean, if there's one thing that's going to stand out for me from this episode is what you just said now, that when it comes to working out, when you work out today, it's only relevant for today. And you can't say I worked out 6 weeks ago, therefore I'm still okay. That analogy applies to so many different facets of our lives. Mr. Sandile Shezi, the suppose former youngest millionaire in South Africa who continues to build a legacy. It's been such an honor for me to sort of be offered or afforded an opportunity to understand a bit about the person that you are, as well as this legacy that you want to leave. It's also clear to me that you want to empower and impart the skills that you have learned on as many people as you possibly can. So from the team on 1000 African Voices, thank you for joining our program and lending your voice to be one of 1000 African Voices. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe in closing, I'd just love to leave this with the listeners, because I know a lot of people always ask me, but Sandile, why do you go out of your way in teaching people what you do all over the world? For me, when I started off, it was about being successful, but right now it's about being significant. And successful means if I chase success, it simply means I want to add value to my life. But when I chase significance, it means I want to add value in other people's lives. And right now, that is all that I'm about, which is empowering other people. So thank you very much. And I hope everybody listening to this got some value out of it. Thank you.
Beautiful. And as you say that, I have a big smile on my face as I realize that just speaking to people like yourselves and sharing that story on 1000 African Voices means even for us, we're doing our bit in making sure that as many Africans as possible can hear your story amongst others and ask themselves what they can do for not only themselves, but for their families, future generations, but for the continent at large. So once again, Sandile, thank you for agreeing to be part of this program.
Thank you very much.
1000 African Voices.
You've been listening to 1000 African Voices. Please join us next time as we bring you yet another African voice. 1000 African Voices is produced by Aburengwi C. Sam Ganich is our sound engineer, with our head researcher Jones Maleka. The intro soundtrack for the show is by the legendary Salif Gator from his 1995 album Forlorn. The song you're listening to right now is by Chronix, and the title of the song is Legend. For more information, including the contact details of our guests, please visit us on our website www.1000africanvoices.com. You can also subscribe to our show on iTunes by searching for 1000 African Voices. We are also available on Stitcher. You can find us as well on Podbean. The only thing we ask of you is that you subscribe to our show by logging on to 1000africanvoices.com and click the subscribe button. That helps us grow. It helps us keep producing and bringing to you more African voices. Until next time, Kungana Africa, and take care.
Being an ordinary person doing what's right. Yesterday at the football game, a little girl asked me my name. She said, "Sir, I've seen you before, tell me who are you?" I said, "I am a legend that you never heard of before." I said, "I am a lion, but you never heard me roar. I am a hero that nobody celebrates. But if one person remembers my name, that means on the ocean of fame I'm an unknown sailor. I'm the percussionist playing with the whalers, the one with the shaker, the mover and shaker. My name wasn't on the front of the paper, but me not cater. Much more than the worker is greater. Creation glorifies creator. So all deeds done are in the name of my maker. I am a legend that you probably never hear about. Words from the lion's mouth. I am a hero that nobody celebrates. But if one person remembers my name, give praise, that means I made a change. Story of my life, ordinary person just like you. If you take a look inside, you see the great things that people do. We're out here changing lives day and night, day in, day out. BBC don't show it, CNN don't show it. He's out.